Obsession. It can be a mark of intensity, of passion's glinting arrow. But that same arrow can be tipped with poison. Lydia, a gored bullfighter, and Alicia, a comatose ballerina. Two women who, for much of this film, are mute, unresponsive, confined, senseless to their hospital beds. These girlfriends in a coma are seen only through flashbacks and the adoring and infatuated gaze of the men who, on the surface, care for them. Marco, a world-weary and lovesick journalist breaking constantly into softly falling tears. And Benigno, an incel mama's boy with a fixation on fascination. What is love when love is unreturned or rejected? And when does adoration trespass and stumble into the territory of the malign? Real humbert hours over here. For Pedro Almodovar, kingpin of Iberian cinematic quandaries, there are no easy answers. Bullfighting, ballet, writing, caring, loving, none of these things seem healthy. All lead to a moment of crisis on this thorny field of crisscrossing paths. Fate, the sucking pull of inevitability, the power of the predetermined. As the film accelerates towards its honestly quite shocking but maybe obvious conclusion, Marco, horrified, rejected, wounded, Benigno, unrepentant, villainous, sympathetic. We realise that this world of bright lights and gaudy colours, the warm reds and burnt oranges so familiar to Almodovar, was strewn with sadness and the horror of being alone. This is MoobTube, a podcast where Owen and Ralph talk about a film they've seen on Mubi, because somebody has to. Ralph, did Talk to Her leave you comatose?
Talk to Her was a very intense experience. I think obsession is a theme in cinema. Vertigo, Rear Window, a lot of classic cinema films are about looking and
the unreturned look.
And voyeurism, and that's something that cinema does uniquely well, I think. I guess the first thing to say about this film is that there's a mixture of luscious beauty and deep discomfort, and I think that the two power each other in an extraordinary way. The more beautiful the experience, the more disturbing it is, and the more you're brought in. And I think this is an important thing to bring in, maybe even in relation to the way we were talking about Showgirls, that like you can really like force your audience into a position of into a cul-de-sac of their own insecurities. Let me put it another way. Benigno and Marco are in the car in the sort of midway point of the film, and Benigno has just said, I want to get married, and Marco says, to who? And he says, to Alicia.
Yep.
Now Alicia is a comatose patient who met Benigno very briefly, but he was basically stalking her, and then she became ill, and he was a nurse at the comatose ward, and he cares for her. He's like one of the main nurses to care for her. This is wiping her bum, cleaning her, filing her nails, and reading stories to her and telling her all about his life. He really finds a kind of one-way companionship with her, and he says he wants to marry her, and Marco quite understandably says, what the hell are you talking about?
What the fuck are you talking about?
She can't consent to any of this. There's no way you could marry someone in that state. And with the response from Benigno is, well, you like her too, don't you?
Yeah, because he catches Marco. Yeah, because there's at various points where Benigno is like doing his ritual of bathing in her, and he often leaves her naked on the bed, which presumably is not standard medical practice, like breasts exposed, everything, and Marco is voyeuristic as well. He ogles her, he looks at her, he sits down next to her when she's got her, like she's naked on the bed, right? So there's these moments where he's caught in this gaze as well. He's wrapped up in this similar kind of voyeurism that Benigno is part of, is orchestrating, almost like Benigno is orchestrating it.
Yeah, I mean, but Benigno is kind like, I think Marco begins wondering why the hell Benigno behaves the way he does. You know, he doesn't buy. There's a film's called Talk to Her, and Benigno encourages Marco to talk to Lydia, his girlfriend, who's in a coma. I know it's serious.
That was my girlfriend's.
Yeah, I know. I saw that very well. Yeah. And he's like, no, I don't want to talk to her. I can barely touch her. I don't want to. I this is alienating for me. And then, he goes from wondering why Benigno is the way he is to wondering why he isn't the way Benigno is. Benigno's approach suddenly kind of takes center stage. Yeah.
Where Marco drifts away from, for various reasons we can explore, he drifts away from Lydia. He's horrified at the thought of touching her body, of caring for her, and it's literally replaced in very short, quick fashion by Lydia's ex-boyfriend, who's another bullfighter, and we sort of quickly understand that Lydia was already planning to end her relationship with Marco before her accident. Mm-hmm. And he discovers this from the boyfriend. Obviously, there's an element of suspending disbelief there but he seems very willing to accept this boyfriend's narrative, right? The guy says, actually, he talks for Lydia. He says, well, Lydia was planning on ending it with you. And Marco's like, oh, okay. And then just leaves. He doesn't challenge or question that because, you know, it's an abnormality, because Benigno and Marco are kind of set up from the very beginning as mirrors of each other in a way. If we remember at the beginning of the film, it opens with a Pina Bausch piece of contemporary dance. Both Benigno and Marco are in the audience next to each other. So there's this point where they're literally...
By pure chance, they don't know each other at this point.
Yeah, by pure chance. The camera kind of lingers on both their faces. Marco cries, the first time of many when tears rolled down his face. And from that point on, they kind of pursue these divergent but forking paths, which are set up like kind of mirrors of each other, even though they cross each other again and again. It's not like Almodovar's giving us this dumb narrative, as it were, where it's like Benigno does one thing and Marco does the complete opposite. They're kind of weird mirrors of each other. Like it's almost like a mise en abîme, where they're kind of reflecting infinitely back into each other. You know, where, like you said, where Benigno is extremely intimately involved with Alicia's body. Marco is not, can't bring himself to touch her, but he does gaze upon, you know, Alicia's body. He makes an attempt at caring for Lydia, but he seems actually more drawn to Benigno, kind of fascinated by Benigno, right?
Yeah, there's a sort of, well, Benigno's alive, I guess, which helps. But there's like, I want to talk a little bit about sexual tension and sexuality. The very first scene, Benigno, who I'm going to be quite crude here and say Benigno seems pretty gay, like he's got a gay vibe. He's quite camp. He's sort of quite like, he's got a slightly feminine appearance.
And his sexuality is questioned.
And his sexuality
it's a subject of discussion throughout the film as well.
Yeah.
So it's,
and at the beginning of the film, he sort of looks towards this sort of handsome, balding, testosterone-heavy man who's in a moment of vulnerability, with tears streaming down his face during the Pina Bausch performance. And later on, he mentions the guy next to him being very handsome. And he kind of operates in this female-only workplace where he's kind of accepted as not a threat because he reads as a gay man. Now, there's a moment where, evidence of the immensely tight script, there's a moment where a family, the father of the comatose Alicia visits and brings up a session that he had with Benigno.
He's like a psychiatrist.
He's a psychiatrist.
Father,
yeah. Important a session.
Just a sesh.
Important detail there. He's a psychotherapist and analyst, whatever. And then later on, we see when we see the full extent of Benigno's stalking of Alicia, we see that he, in order to kind of stalk her, he had genuine therapy sessions with her father, where his sexuality was, and Alicia's father quite justifiably kind of wants to ascertain his sexuality a bit, because obviously this man is touching his daughter.
Yeah, when he walks
day.
into the hospital room, Benigno's there massaging her upper thigh.
Exactly.
And that's what the camera lingers on before the father says this question.
I just think it's something I've not seen shown much in film, which is like the way in which assumptions are made about men's sexual desires, and that sort of shapes how they manifest their sexual desires. And I would say, like, kind of what's unusual about this film is it's a film about a man whose heterosexuality, not his homosexuality, is repressed by outside forces. The level of like desire that Benigno has for Alicia and the kind of desire to kind of conquer and dominate, and the way he kind of, I mean, he's at least a bit straight,
Yeah,
and yet that's repressed, and by being repressed it becomes very violent. But because of the position, this kind of very safe zone that he operates, where he can kind of massage his own fantasies and her thighs. Sorry, that sounded quite grim.
Yeah, but it's true. It's a true thing that happens in this film, because he has that, as it were, free pass as a medical professional, whatever, to come into contact with her body constantly and violate her. But the line between violation and care is what he crosses. It's this ethical, this obviously stark ethical boundary that he crosses.
But where was that line before? Because I feel like he was assaulting her in a certain kind of way.
I think he always was.
Yeah, he was always. There was always a form
his
of
intentions. He almost manipulated himself into this position. Yeah, he trained to be a nurse, and it's unclear. Okay, so some context is that Benigno lives opposite the dance studio where Alicia trains. So he, in a true Rear Window style, he can literally see her training, and often stands. We get the impression he's standing there a lot. Watching her.
It's a small world in this film. There are a lot of like coincidences that make the plot run much smoother than it might otherwise do.
Yeah, but he's watching her.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, he's caring for his mother. His father's absent. He's been caring for his mother his whole life, right? Yeah, it's this classic psycho vibe. He's been caring for his mother in like the Spanish equivalent of the Bates Motel. And he's it's when he talks to the psychiatrist asking kind of establishing questions about his upbringing and his life, and he's like, we find out he's a virgin. We understand he's like 20, 21 probably at that time. He was caring for his mother. It's unclear what his mother's needs were. Now, when Benigno describes it, he says, "Oh, my mother wasn't ill. She wasn't disabled. She was just lazy." So it's unclear whether kind of Benigno was kind of foisting this kind of unwanted care on a mother who's absent during this film. We never meet her. We never see her. She dies. And at that point, he transfers his fixations onto somebody else. The cat agrees there, if you pick that up. So he transfers his fixation. And there's this interesting thing about Benigno as this like roving force of obsession, because he has this obsession with his mother. It transfers to Alicia when his mother dies or is killed. I don't know. There's always this like undercurrent that he might be involved in
Didn't
other
cross my
ways.
mind that he was killed,
I did wonder though, because maybe he saw that now's time to move on, and his mother would have got in the way. When we learn about, we see Lydia's injury in very graphic, stunning, Technicolor, you know, almost.
Well, she's a star, you know, she's a celebrity.
Bullfighter, yeah. She's at the, and it's almost inevitable, right? I think this is like Roger Ebert's review is quite good because he points out how like the whole setup of that bullfighting scene, you know she's going to get hit. Like we know she's in a coma anyway, this is a flashback, but everything about that scene is like a triumphant death. And she, you know, kneels down on the ground, and the bull comes out and just gores her straight away. And so Almodovar spends a lot of time giving us the physical reality of this wounding and this goring, but for like Alicia, we don't get it. We only see it through Benigno's description, where he's like, "Oh, it was raining. There was a car accident." It's like, what is that? You know, in my head, it might be bullshit, but I was like, you know, did he push her in the road? Did he drive the car? There's almost just like,
but I don't think he's that much of a. Well, I mean,
yeah.
He is a psych. But do you know what I mean? Like, I think that
the ambiguity is there.
I don't
give me
think,
that.
Yeah, the ambiguity's there. That kind of bit passed me by actually, but yeah, I guess. So yeah, I don't think it's giving very much away to say that eventually Benigno rapes and impregnates Alicia, and this is shown through a silent film about a man a lab scientist who drinks a potion that has the side effect of making him very small, and when his partner is asleep, and when he's become very small because of this potion, he climbs inside her vagina, and this he recounts this having she's a big fan of silent films. He learns through stalking her, and he goes to see silent films specifically so that he can go to the hospital at work and tell her all about them.
Yeah.
And he tells her about this one. We see the short film itself, and then we just cut to various scenes where she's not having her period.
Her breasts are swollen, her stomach's swollen. It's slowly, the pieces kind of get picked up, right? And he at first, like you said before, he kind of falls. He's not immediately under suspicion for the same reasons that his claimed asserted homosexuality stops, like him being a suspect for kind of being attracted to Alicia. It also for a while gets him off the hook, as it were, until there's a confrontation between the doctors, and one of the other nurses recounts the conversation Benigno had in the car park with Marco, which is what you referred to earlier, you know, when he's like, I want to marry Alicia.
Yeah.
So if it were not for that conversation being overheard, there's almost a suspicion that Benigno kind of would have avoided, maybe for a while, recrimination.
Yeah, although he is the prime suspect. From that point on, everything is seen through sort of consequences, and I think it's really important that, as disgusting as Benigno's actions are, like, it's very important that these kind of fantasies and desires are taken to their logical conclusion, and then he faces the kind of institutional consequences of them. And you see the way in which all these people who were kind of happily walking by and allowing him to be a little bit eccentric are now having to handle him, and he becomes like a child in it at this point. He becomes very very passive and kind of helpless.
Yeah, because he's put in a prison which we're led to believe is a psychiatric prison.
Yeah,
because when Marco goes to finds out he's in prison, because Marco disappears after Lydia's boyfriend turns up and says she was going to leave you. He goes traveling, so he's in Jordan. You know, smart move,
just
always
move on. You know, try and think.
Eat, pray, love.
Well, not that.
He's
a travel guy, though. He writes these. He's
a travel writer. Yeah. So he finds out through a nurse who is sympathetic to Benigno that Benigno's in prison. He goes to visit him in prison, and it's kind of like a minimum security vibe. and the woman on the reception desk kind of corrects him that they're not inmates. They're, what does she call them?
Lodgers is what the subtitle said.
Weird.
The word was intern. In the Spanish word was internos or something.
Internos, yeah. So she's very insistent.
Like they're working
about
on
that.
a magazine or something.
Yeah, so I thought. But ultimate punishment.
That's what happens when you
become a social media manager if you commit crimes. But he's kind of incarcerated. We'll talk about the kind of denouement in a bit, probably, because there's this kind of Romeo and Juliet spin, right, to the narrative, almost like the last minute kind of. Well, Benigo commits suicide, unaware that Alicia survives the pregnancy and comes out of a coma.
And Benigno is like attempting to get into a coma. I think he takes more drugs than he intends to.
He ODs.
Because he says, come and visit me when I'm all vegetable-y,
It reminds me that Alicia's tutor comes and visit her and calls her beautiful potato.
Oh,
it's very sweet.
Hell, it's so painful for all these people.
It is really painful, and
so
it's just
many
like
people in this film are going through like intense pain. I really just I just want to shout out to like how accepting and compassionate Almodovar is, and how he manages to avoid demonizing like
anyone in an obvious way.
And I do think that's important. I think that's like really important to defend. Like if we're ever to understand the ills of society, we must look at them with with sharp focus.
I think this is it. He shows that evil things happen in the world, disgusting acts happen, and they don't happen through the machinations of comic book villains. They happen through people who are reasonable and charming and acceptable and human, and that's the greater tragedy
and who are hurt
in a way,
as well.
This is a world of pain. You might call the whole film with a nod to Almodovar's new film Pain and Glory, but it is a world of pain where everyone is hurting. One thing that Marco's tears. So Marco cries a lot in this film. He cries, and it's quite beautiful that he's accepting of his tears. He doesn't brush them away. He lets them kind of roll down his cheeks. He cries at the theatre at the beginning. He cries when he hears like a classic musician singing at a party. He cries after he kills a snake. Rescues Lydia, who sort of ironically is brave and proud before a goring bull, but terrified of snakes. And he cries all these instances, and he confides later to Lydia that these tears are because these are moments he wanted to share with his ex, who he's no longer with, and he's mourning a relationship that's passed.
Quite a troubled one.
Quite a troubled relationship, right? And it's like everyone in this film is mourning. Lydia is mourning for her ex-boyfriend. There's a moment which is really interesting about how the public treats stories of private trauma, because Lydia goes on television because she's a celebrity in Spain, and is interviewed in this kind of talk showy, kind of trashy talk show program, and the presenter is weirdly invasive. She keeps asking about her relationship with this ex, who's another bullfighter, and Lydia says, she stands her ground and says, like, I said I wasn't going to talk about this, I don't want to talk about this, and the presenter keeps pushing and insisting to the point where she grabs Lydia and pulls her down again and again onto the sofa. It's an intensely like brutal, invasive, weird thing to watch.
And she says like, you're oppressed, like you need to speak out about your oppression, which I thought was quite. I thought that like that amazing like projection of narrative, it really sort of foreshadows this kind of objectification and instrumentalization that happens to the women. And also it's all bookended with the Pina Bausch, and Pina Bausch is like the queen of like heterosexual pain. And like like women's bodies being thrown around by men, and men's bodies feeling useless, and like all these kind of
because that's the thing, that the initial piece we see from Pina Bausch is two blind women in a room who are stumbling around, kind of knocking into chairs whilst a man tries to remove the chairs from their path. and it's this kind of futile, cyclical thing, which kind of alludes to what will happen later, which is both Marco and Benigo in their own way, moving the chairs for these women, but their own pain leads them to do it to either not be up to the task or to do great violence and damage through that act, showing that the act of care is kind of poisoned by trauma. How can you care and love in a world which is like full of hurt? Basically, it's a really like sad film in that sense.
It's so sad. It reminds me of that book by Goethe, The Stories of Young Werther.
Stories of Young Werther, yeah.
Have you read it?
Werther? A long time ago.
Long
time ago.
It's
I was there. I was there after he emailed it to me.
A long time ago, in the late 1700s.
Yeah.
Very controversial book because
I got
of
the
course
galleys.
There were quite a few copycat suicides after that book. Because it was it so profoundly expressed the pain that a man can experience, lusting, love, like desiring, falling in love with, like having kind of mania. There's that brilliant phrase on Twitter, having a crush is basically being in a committed relationship with your own mania. And I think that rings very true in this film and in
it's Roland Barthes,
a lot of
isn't
literature.
It's Roland Barthes' Lover's Discourse, because
right.
it's the obsession or love is an act of destruction, and the act of obsession and love is an obsession with the mirror or the image of yourself. It has nothing to do with the person that you love. It's nothing to do with it's nothing to do with the subject. It's everything to do with the person. It's everything to do with the one who loves. And it's interesting because it's the same thing that happened to it's that classic story about Mayakovsky, the Russian poet, 20s poet, who, when everyone in Russia during the 20s was getting down and freaky in polyamorous relationships and experimental living situations, he was in a polyamorous relationship, a kind of three-way relationship with a man and another woman, and this relationship tore him apart. So he committed suicide, sort of 1929, I think, or 28.
Polyamory. Don't try it at home, kids.
Don't try it. Here's a warning. And he left his suicide note. It was quite short and had an exclamation point, actually, which was the ship of life has crashed upon the rocks of love. And it's this very melodramatic,
fucking
quite beautiful,
hell, man.
succinct
That's a bit too
thing.
much.
Yeah, it's too much, right? He was too much, though, being about 7 foot and bald. But yeah, this is it. This film is about obsession and destruction and trauma, really, and how those things condition our ability to act well in the world. It's that Philip Larkin poem, isn't it? Sort of, mum and dad are fucked up, and they pass it down. You're fucked up too, whatever the words are. I can't remember. But shit, he likens it to the shelves of an ocean. Shit just passes down and down and down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
am I being too cynical?
I'm a bit more optimistic than that, but I don't know. Things just kind of are, aren't they? And it's
that was The Wire. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
The streets are the streets.
I mean, you can't. I don't think I don't. This is. We're going a bit general now, but I don't think it's. I'm not fond of dwelling on longing, I suppose, but films like this really just, they do hit home in a certain way. I think it's I don't know how to say this in a way that works in the contemporary way we talk about the world, but men watch this film and they go, fuck, I really hope I'm not that guy. Right? They must do. I do. Yeah. I watch it, I'm just fuck, this is terrifying. And I recognize, and it's the society we live in, desire when it comes from a guy is because of, I guess, the privilege and the power we have, it's it can take on an obsessional quality in a more, I mean, girls stalk guys as well, and it can be equally terrifying. But
yeah.
But yeah, like
but no, you're right.
The context, as a guy, you look at it and you're like, as a straight guy, and it's just like, yeah, like fuck, like, you know, and the power and the responsibility he has, and the way that he can't really, it's all too late, it's all inevitable, it's all coming down the tracks. He has to do this, and I mean that in a very like, it's just like it's teed up, like the whole thing is like, it's like
predetermined almost.
Just the way he looks at her, in the as soon as he's already kind of done the act, he's already, I don't know, there's a thing with looking and rape and violence, there's a through line there, which is what makes this whole I'm not articulating it very well, I'm probably saying stuff I don't mean.
No, you are like
there's like a through line there between, which is very cinematic, between like looking and desiring and objectifying and abusing and I guess fundamentally it comes down to the fact that she has literally no agency for the vast majority of the film.
She is comatose.
Even when she's not comatose, she's kind of like, oh, what's that? Oh, weird.
And she's still in that sense, because of Benigo's trauma and because of his obsession kind of controlling him, authoring him, he's unable to see that she is powerless. You know, she sees her as like a flat mirror, a flat lake or something, and it's strange because, you know, she doesn't even reject him. That's not even what's happening here, because she doesn't even have the agency to reject. This is entirely monovocal, this thing.
But Marco, interestingly, has like an extraordinary dignity, especially at the start. You know, he like you say, like he cries with ease, and he's very respectful, and he's very sort of honest about his emotions, and there's something really admirable and dignified about him. And yet he's not immune to the obsessional tendency. Like that I thought was conveyed really well. Yeah,
because I think in a way, you know I talked about sort of comic book villains, but Benigo is more obviously the slightly more two-dimensional than Marco, and that's intentional because he is a monster, and he in these ways, and he's lacking in emotional empathy, he's lacking boundaries, he's, you know, what you might call in some ways, and I use this term extremely loosely, but just I won't even use the term, he's just socially ill-adjusted because he's lived a very sheltered life.
Were you going to say narcissist?
Possibly, I was going to say narcissist, yeah, because he is looking into the pool of his own reflection, right?
I think he is.
And he falls in and drowns, and he damages people along the way. And like I said earlier, he is this roving, he's filling his own void, right, with other people. He fills the void of his mother, cares for her, like we kind of understand, possibly unnecessarily perhaps. He obsesses with Alicia, and like you said, he goes to silent movies and watches the films she would have watched. He has no interest of his own beyond the person he's obsessed with. He's consumed by his obsession. He tells her the things she wants to hear, and then after he goes to prison, his obsession shifts again to Marco. He tells Marco he reads all of Marco's books, and he says it's almost like being there with you. And he suddenly starts showing this intense obsession with Marco as well. So he's constantly filling himself with other people. And the kind of the non-disclosed thing, or thing we haven't talked about here, is loneliness.
Yeah. Because
it's a deeply lonely film. There are no scenes here, you know, where we looked at the commune last week, when there's lots of like fractured and kind of socially broken hanging out, but there's people having dinner together and having a good time. Here, everyone seems to be completely on their own, even when they're talking to other people. No better scene than when we see the balcony shot where it's Alicia and Lydia put next to each other, you know, with their sunglasses on and the blankets over them. They're literally sitting together, you know, not talking. Nobody's talking in this film, which is ironic because the title obviously is Talk to Her. Nobody's fucking talking. Nobody's listening. And it's, so he is filling himself with other people. Marco has a void in him as well, which is his failed relationship, which is, you know, interesting. He accepts with great dignity, he accepts, you know, that Lydia has moved on. He kind of respects her wishes even when she's unconscious, which, you know, kind of going back on what I said earlier, maybe that was the more dignified thing. He didn't say, wait a minute. He's emotionally sensitive enough to know that he's kind of picked up the clues maybe from their relationship.
Yeah, and also he's protecting himself from what he can clearly see is happening with Benigno.
Yeah.
You know, that
very
if
much.
you do begin that conversation with the vegetable, someone that can't respond, then you're consigning yourself to this pool of like it does him no good.
Yeah, he trips into this pool and drowns effectively, and you know, Marco kind of saves himself from that. But it's interesting. How did you take the end? Because there's a sense in which Marco kind of steps into the life of Benigno slightly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, talk about that, because after Marco kills himself.
Well,
after Benigno kills himself.
Yeah. So Marco, Alicia, she can't see. She doesn't know what Marco knows, and so Marco has this. He's seen. She knows. I think she knows that she was raped and impregnated, but by this person who's now in prison. But she doesn't know that Marco was privy to all that story. She doesn't know who Marco is. And they exchange glances, and she seems like maybe attracted to him. And so there's this sexual tension, and then there's a very kind of cheeky title card that comes up saying
Marco and Alicia.
Marco and Alicia, whereas before we had a title card saying Benigno and Alicia. I just think it's kind of, it's tying the film up nicely. It didn't make me... It made me, I guess, concerned.
Do you think...
because I think, that's probably not going to work out very well. In films where you have patterns, you think about the kind of Freudian compulsion to repeat, So I wasn't I just sort of felt that's neat, and that kind of,
because he moves into Marco's apartment and starts watching.
I mean that baits it out a bit, doesn't it? He's in the
it does. It's kind of quite
visible.
Or he's like taking on this caring role, maybe.
I think he wants to do right. I think that's the really sort of terrifying Vertigo Hitchcock vibe of it all, is that he's seen what's happened, and he thinks that by seeing what's happened, he can maybe
by witnessing.
By witnessing, he thinks that he can maybe do it right, and he's he's in a better position to do it right because he's not got all those mummy issues, and he's and he's more handsome and more emotionally intelligent. But
but true,
and maybe he will. But there's just the film doesn't give you the best indication.
No, Almodovar dangles it in front of you. He's this is weird.
It's a cheeky thing, and whatever. This isn't real life.
It maybe lets it down a little bit. I mean, but there is that point. I mean, the difference there is that if we are to believe this kind of paternalistic message that he is taking this mothering role, which is often something that's quite consistent in Almodovar's films, right? That there's mothering and caring and toxicity that kind of can attach to that, especially when men are involved. He does talk to Alicia's tutor, right, in the theatre, where he kind of bumps into them because Alicia's tutor knows the whole story. It's implied,
and she's kind of a mother in a certain way, isn't she?
Exactly. I mean, the question here is: does Alicia doesn't need Marco's care, paternalism? She never needed more than a nurse, and again, it's tragic. It's people pouring themselves onto other people who don't fucking need it. But Marco does have this conversation. She's got a shrink
for a dad, so she's probably got some fucking issues.
I mean, there's that issue where Marco does talk to. He approaches the tutor, and she said, they say we need to talk. Actually, which is a nice callback to the title of the film again, I guess. But there's an implication that they're going to have a frank discussion about what happened. But that's never shown, and that's kind of a conversation that happens in the extended universe of this film, and that does imply a kind of caring message that Almodovar is saying that he's gonna spill what he knows properly and fully to the tutor, the dance teacher, and his motivations aren't spooky, even though they might be. Almodovar kind of leaves it ambiguous, and that's fine. Ambiguous ending, cool. It's an ambiguous film.
I think his motivations are totally it's interesting, the question of what a motivation is. I don't think there's that bit where Benigno runs into Alicia just after she's had a shower, and she's just a towel around her, and and he's like, "Don't worry, I'm harmless," you know. And it's like he genuinely
clearly not.
He genuinely believes that he's harmless.
Yeah.
You know, and in a way, it's like it's just interesting through line from like I'm harmless to like, oh, they've put me in a prison for people who are mad.
Yeah. Ooh,
you know,
what?
and
This is strange.
it's kind of like that's quite alarming in a way.
That's the thing. He's in a sense of narcissism again.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's dumb in the literal sense of the word to his own. He can't vocalize or understand his own culpability, and that's not to let him off the hook at all. But you know, he is. Whereas Marco is quite emotionally sensitive. Again, these mirrors of each other. Benigno really.
But that's
isn't.
how everyone justifies their behavior, by having a narrative
of care, maybe.
Yeah.
Because he is the caregiver. He seems he believes he's the one doing what Alicia needs, and obviously the interesting thing is there is like a void of care around her, because we actually don't really see her father ever at her side, and we see the other nurses who kind of permit, like you said, Abinigo's eccentricities, which clearly at many points in the film kind of step over the mark. But they're like, they quickly wash it away. They're like, he's gay, it's fine. Like that would make any of this okay. Like it's interesting. Yeah, she's surrounded by, I suppose, kind of indifference. I think that itself is interesting. A film that is ostensibly all about caring and the act of caring, where in reality there's really not much. And maybe Marco's at the end is kind of like the possibility of care in an ethically sound way. I don't know.
How to care when there aren't kind of examples of care.
Yeah, in the world.
On that note, we've hit the buffer time-wise.
Yeah.
But it was worth it.
That was intense. That was a hell of a ride.
Yeah. I highly recommend this film. A difficult watch.
Because I was, you're more Almodovar au fait than I am. I was like, I've seen like half of All About My Mother, and I've seen Volva like a long time ago.
I'd recommend The Skin I Live In, although it's maybe a bit, it's quite unsettling. It's like, I don't know, it's quite like what happens.
Yes, what he does though, he's an unsettling director of unsettling stuff.
The Skin I Live In is similar to Talk to Her in that way. It's more about revenge. Then there are more playful farces. Earlier in his career, he made much more kind of flippant films, I think.
Yeah. Maybe
flippant's the wrong word, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really. There's a lot of films by him that I can really take or leave, but this.
Yeah. This surprised me how much I liked it. Because I was all ready to kind of, that's a bit. Do we have to? But I'm glad we did it. I'm also glad, before we sign off, our little straw poll that we did.
Oh yes.
On Twitter.
Poll smoking with Owen Vince.
There's a landslide in favour of so we did a poll on Twitter asking about people's preferred length, kind of perfect length of a feature film. 90 minutes, 120 minutes, 180 minutes, 200 minutes plus. The vast overwhelming majority of you want 90-minute films. I'm taking that as absolute, Yeah.
That's
proof.
Although I would say I'm always happiest when a film is an hour and a half, but my absolute favourite films are usually 2.5 hours.
Yeah, same. I think there's a sense of like relief when you crack open like a film or movie or whatever, and you glance down bottom right hand corner, and you're like,
89 minutes.
89 minutes, like, yeah, fucking yes. But some of I think, like I was saying on Twitter as well, like when a film is written from the ground up as a long film, and it's so like length is sewn into its fabric, then it works at longer lengths and durations. But when it's like a bloated film of Tate Nymphomaniac, our constant whipping boy, a film which kind of does and says nothing and just kind of sprawls and goes on and fucking on. That was that's a film that doesn't have length kind of built into it. So it can't do the miles. It can't do the miles. It's like stumbling over the fucking finish line. It's shitting itself on the final 100 yards.
Yeah. What else was I going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also a question of like time and how we structure our lives and capitalist time. You know, like I've watched Say It in Tango maybe 3 or 4 times. Not trying to boast or anything. It's a 7 hour.
They used to call that a humble brag, didn't they?
You used to say what?
They used to call it a humble brag.
A humble brag, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Say It in Tango a few times.
Yeah. This is I put it on during breakfast each morning. It gets me right, you know.
And what do you have to do with Say It in Tango, because it's 7 hours and because it's all kind of set within, like all the action takes place within a week. You kind of have to just do it in one day, and you give yourself breaks, obviously, but
no breaks.
It requires
piss yourself where you sit.
Soiling, constant soiling. just watch it on the toilet. Get yourself some piles. But yeah, no, I mean, like I really enjoy what it did to my day when I watched Say It in Tango. In a day, you know, like I enjoy the fact that really long films can, like Lav Diaz is great for this, can really kind of push you to experience time differently. It's a little bit like meditation. So but you wrote about this in your great essay on
I did briefly
the Tube Substack,
and even about a filmmaker who doesn't do length, Pedro Almodovar, but does what is considered is a similar territory, which is boredom and things that are slow cinema can be short, you know.
Yeah.
Because it's about the energy of that film. So, you know, Pedro Almodovar is, even if Colour of Pomegranates is 60-ish minutes, it feels a lot longer. Time is kind of dilated, and that's why people often fall asleep during it.
I don't fall asleep. The only films I fall asleep during are A Picture Upon Vera Sathakal films, and I was much vindicated when I learned that he'd done an installation at Rotterdam Film Festival called Sleep, where people were invited to fall asleep in a hotel where his films were playing on every screen.
Beautiful. There we go.
But yeah, otherwise I don't fall asleep during anything
ever.
Except
you've never slept, have you? How is that? Totally wired.
Would be nice. Totally wired.
Totally
would be nice. Would be nice to just catch a little.
One day.
But you know, it's meant that I've been able to read a lot. I haven't. It's a lot of pornography.
A lot of pornography, and you scrolled Twitter.
I've reached the end of Twitter.
You've completed it.
I got back to 2006. Yeah.
Holy shit! What is there like in that great beyond?
A Groupon voucher,
and like actual celebrities interacting with like it's like people like Hugh Jackman being like, "Wow, hi Twitter."
Yeah, it used to be like that, didn't it? I've been on Twitter since I was a teenager, and it was really. It feels my Twitter existence is now the most similar to how it was when I was a teenager, in that I basically just have like up to 10 people who interact with me and who I interact with,
and the rest is just same.
The rest is just famous people that, you know.
I have an empty follow account. You know, so do me a favor and just fucking like my tweets, all right?
You have an empty follow account?
Well, no, it's just like there's no like it's weird how mate. Over 1,000, but like the people who actually interact with my stuff is like quite, unless I go out and bait people. And I feel empty. It's like masturbating. You just go out and you just feel really empty.
It's, you know, the world is violent enough as it is, you know.
I know. I can't help it.
Well, we'll figure out off air which film we review next week.
Yeah, because we've gone on for far too long.
We have. But thank you for listening.
Talking about length.
Size isn't important. But quality is.
Girth. The girth of the podcast is what matters.
All right. Bye.
Bye.